back to another episode of Faith Helps Podcast, and I am your host, Diamond Booth. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome! You are loved, you are cared, and you are welcomed into the space. Cool? Now, if you've been rocking with me for a minute, cool beans. I'm glad that you're here, and keep tuning in. If you missed it, last week I mentioned to you guys that I finally have the podcast on Apple Podcasts, and I pretty much threatened you guys to absolutely subscribe because many of you kept asking for it. It's on there. It took me forever to get done, and now it's there. As you guys can see, I'm still going strong with the video and the audio duo. I'm still learning and working out the technical difficulties when it comes to like camera and audio. Suggestions are welcomed, as well as donations if you want to donate a camera. Just kidding, but not really. Anyway, as you can see, I have a guest here with me. And so today's topic, I'm still going strong with the change. So last week, if you didn't tune in, I really encourage you to go listen to that episode. I was kind of talking about change as it relates to sometimes we encounter like situations in our life where we want to see something different, and I feel like in this generation sometimes we get complacent with just being upset with what's not changing and not realizing that there are some things in our control that we can change. And I feel like you being the amazing clinician that you are a great person and friend to kind of invite into this space. And so for context, it would be helpful to listen to last week's episode so you'll kind of understand the transition for this episode. So last week was kind of about just confronting change and making that decision to really sit back and say, okay, I don't like XYZ that's happening in my life, or whether it's something related to my relationships, my career, my behaviors, whatever it might be, and actually making a plan on how to do it. And I feel like this is a particularly important topic to talk about because I don't know if you have seen it in your work with this population, but I feel like it comes up a lot where people want change, but for some reason they're kind of getting stuck and they're stopping. And I feel like because this is something that's pretty prominent, especially at this time of year, graduations, transitions, adjustment, and then change just being a big thing for people, especially with mental health being such a popular topic now. Everyone wants to be the best selves and be the better version of themselves. And so I feel like it comes up a lot, and I think that it's important to have healthy intellectual dialogue about what change can look like and how to actually access it and make those things happen. So I have an amazing friend here, soon to be, very, very soon to be Dr. Liabette Escamilla. Oh, okay. I was practicing it in my head to make sure I got it right.
Yeah, you did.
And not only are you an amazing researcher, an amazing colleague, an amazing friend, a phenomenal wife, a phenomenal daughter, and so many other titles that you hold in the many roles that you have in your life. But you are an astounding clinician, and I know firsthand that your clients like sing your praises because I hear them. So I know that you're an amazing clinician. I know that you also in your approach to therapy, pretty much kind of integrate CBT and RCT. And I would love to kind of like let you expound more on that. That hasn't been my particular like expertise, and more psychodynamic, kind of integrative as well. So we share some of those similarities. But can you just introduce yourself and who you are, whatever you'd like to share?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. Like Simon said, my name is Liabette Escamilla. And I'll go through some of those, I guess, like roles that I have. So I am a wife. It'll be 4 years in the summer that I've been married to my wonderful husband. I'm a daughter. Hi, Mom. It feels cool to be able to like shout out my mom.
Yeah.
She's great.
She really is.
She's really she decorated my jacket. That
It
was like
so cute.
it's like neither here nor there, but she made these for our like winter concert together, and we both have this jacket.
Twinsies.
Twinsies. Yeah, I'm a clinician, and like you said, I integrate CBT and RCT. I think most of my training was in CBT, and what I saw was that focusing on just like behavioral change or thought change was like one half of the picture, and it was more of like this like short-term relief, but then what does that mean later? And so I think that is where RCT kind of filled in those gaps for me of like more long-term, a little more like insight, a little more integrating past into like your current functioning, and then also just a big like relational piece, which I think is super important for like just multicultural considerations and just allowing those other pieces of like who we are into therapy. I'm a PhD student.
Yes. Finishing up the dissertation.
I know. Both exciting and a little bit of the bane of my existence, but so my program is from A&M. In my 4th year. Wow. It's been a hot minute.
I did not realize this is your 4th year.
Yeah. Going into August would be like my 5th.
Yay.
Dang. It's been a hot minute.
And you're surviving.
Thank you.
And thriving.
Oh, thanks.
You are.
Sometimes it just feels like surviving. Hopefully a little bit of thriving in there. I'm also Latina. I heard a comedian once, and he was like, yeah, I'm Mexican. And they were like, from what country? And he said, Texas. And I was like, me too. Laredo, yeah. So yeah, I think those are like most of like my salient identities that kind of make me who I am, and they're part of how I approach life.
Yeah. And I feel like it also shows like even in like how you carry yourself here at the office.
Really?
Do you care if I like share how we like met?
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Because it just came to mind. I'm like, it's such a funny story. So Liabette and I are both interns here at William and Mary. And the very first day that we met was our like first official day of internship. And I'm sitting and I'm waiting in the lobby, and I've shared this with you. And I feel like I've shared a lot of details about myself on this podcast, so I don't really care. I'm like, you know me now. I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm like, I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be social. I'm going to get into this internship, and I'm going to get out. And just like very like anti like connection. And I remember just sitting there like, Diamond, just like, get into this internship, keep your head down, focus on what you need to do, get in, get out. And here comes this beautiful, like, bubbly spirit just coming into my, like, little dark clouded space. And you, like, sit down and you're like, hi! And you were just so bright. And I was just like, hey. And I remember, like, I couldn't even, like, not, like, it was contagious. Like, even though I was trying to keep my guard up and my wall up, it's like, don't trust people, just focus. You were like, nope. Just open the door.
The wall stunted.
Yeah.
My intention coming in, because I had prayed about internship, and I was like, God, like, I just really want friends. Like, I want to have, like, a close cohort. So, like, wherever you match me, let the other people be, like, great people that I can be friends with, because I need connection. Like, I need community in, like, stress. And so when I came in, I was like, where are my best friends at? Like, like I have already decided.
It's so funny. Even the, like, the dynamics that we don't even know, because this isn't something we talked about until, like, months later. I think one of the, like, turning points for me was partly finding out that you do identify as Christian and seeing how unapologetic you were about it. Because in, like, previous settings, that I've been in, I've kind of felt like I had to hide that part of my identity because you never know like how someone may respond. Or like a lot of people have like church hurt or hurt from Christianity, so I often am like very sensitive and kind of like reserved and kind of walking the eggshells. And so I remember just like seeing like that boldness about you and that openness, and you literally have a light about you. And what I won't do is cry, because I don't know what's happening, but that's what we're not going to do.
I was about to say, you can cry.
See, therapist. But I won't. But I remember in particular, there was this one day I was like really struggling with something like a personal interaction I was having with somebody, like not here at the site, but someone back at home. And I like, my mind was just so clouded and I wasn't able to really like think like clearly on how to express myself to this person and set a firm boundary. And I remember going to your office and I was like, friend, can I ask advice? And you like processed the situation with me. It was super validating, super affirming and reassuring. And I was like, okay, I got this. I came back to my office, and it's probably reflective of what I need to do spiritually. Like, but I come back to my office, and immediately I feel like anxious and confused and disoriented again. And I'm like, what am I supposed to be saying? Like, how am I supposed to be asserting myself? I come back to your office, and I immediately feel peace. Before saying anything to you, I go like in your office, and like it was just this peace that I felt, and you let me like sit down. You were doing your notes. I sit down in your client's chair, and like clarity like just came back, and that felt so powerful for me because those type of experiences kind of weigh heavy for me. So when I was able to have that interaction and just like observing that meant a lot. And so
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I had been listening to worship music that day.
Yes, you were listening to worship music,
and I feel like it was the presence of the Lord in that place.
Oh, for sure. And it felt safe. It felt safe. And we went off topic. And so we're gonna reroute this because we already like talked about your eyes. They do this thing, and I don't want none of that juju.
All right,
keep it for your clients.
I'll look at the beautiful people.
But yeah, and I think speaking of change, that was a big change for me because I think God knew that I was coming into the setting of I don't trust people and I'm guarded, and I was very content with that. And so over those couple of months, like I had to start confronting like some of the hurt, some of my own trauma, a lot of like self-reflection. I remember, because this is a tangent, but it's fine, because this is what we do. I remember one day you shared with me this reflection of, Diamond, I feel like you tend to hide, or like you try to hide. And I remember going, and it's still me.
I remember.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, something along those lines. I was like, I noticed that you don't like to be seen, or that you try not to be seen. You try not to be seen.
I try not to be seen. Yeah, that turned into a whole therapy assignment.
And I didn't mean it to.
But it was healthy, and kind of like something that I was saying in last week's episode. Some parts of change require you to be uncomfortable, and like sitting down and being like confrontational with the parts of your lifestyle, behaviors, your functioning that you're not liking. And so I had to sit down with that question and like really unpack like, why don't I want to be seen? Why do I feel like I need to like hide or just like kind of step off into the shadows?
No.
I'll share those reflections with you in the future.
Yeah, like I didn't know you sat with that.
Yeah, it's a whole. So I have like a little my own therapy book where I journal about things.
Same.
Whole section based off of that question and like all the other things that it went into. But it was very healing, and it was also like insightful, and it also challenged me to say, okay, this is a pattern I don't like in my life, and it's not a pattern that's going to be conducive to where I'm trying to go in my future. So I had to sit down and say, okay, well, we're here now, so we're going to just, confront this. Because I remember in the moment, I was like, excuse me? Did you just therapize me? But, and I feel like that is what a healthy relationship does in your life. And that was like one of the things I mentioned in last week's episode, is getting around people and surrounding yourself with people who can help you along with those changes, but also hold you accountable. And sometimes certain people need to get removed so healthy people like you can enter into their lives. But I feel like that can be, change in general can be really difficult. And I'm sure that's something that you've seen with your clients as far as like change being difficult. Or what would you say has been like the change, what makes change difficult for your clients or people in general?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that make change difficult. What comes to mind, so my advisor, Dr. Ridley, he has Ridley-isms, so like things that he like says, they're even like in his PowerPoints. He's like, this is a Ridley-ism. And honestly, they've like stuck with me. And one of them is, he was like, it's not a choice between pain and painlessness. It's a choice between necessary pain and unnecessary pain. And that sat with me because I think that is where we struggle with change, because it's not a choice between pain and painlessness. Like, either the situation you're in is causing you pain, and that's unnecessary, like you don't have to have that, or we can have necessary pain, which is like the pain of change, like that discomfort, the struggle, the not linear healing, we try, we make a mistake, we try again. And I think that's what like really came to mind when I was thinking like, what stands in the way? Like, and I think we have to kind of like sit with that a little bit and like really ingest it. And it sounds like you were talking about that already. Yeah, I think that's a big thing that gets in the way.
It's so powerful. Like, kind of, and I think the part that I'm thinking about is, it is a question of like unnecessary versus necessary pain.
Yeah. I saw on Instagram, and it's like, choose your hard. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen that.
I don't even know who I'm citing in these things. It's like Instagram. But yeah, she was like, choose your hard. Like, it's hard. I don't know. What's like a thing we want to change? Like, it's hard to put yourself out there and make friends, and it's hard to be lonely.
Yeah.
Choose your hard. Like, it's hard to set a new goal, but it's hard to stay complacent. Like, choose your hard.
That makes sense.
And I feel like what he's saying is similar to that.
Yeah, because either one is going to be difficult. You have to choose. I think sometimes we think not choosing is like, oh, okay, we're just avoiding it, but that's still a choice. Like, inevitably, you're going to have to kind of come to this point or this crossroads. It's almost like a crossroads, I don't know if you would agree.
Yeah.
But either keeping along the path that you've been going, even though there are things that you don't like about it, or doing something that may be new and uncertain, and you don't know what this path leads to, but it's an option and an opportunity to change. I think something like one of my clients said a few weeks ago, with like a difficult part of change for them was they don't know what the change is going to look like.
Yeah.
And I think it was along the lines of like social anxiety, like what is it going to look like to put myself out there more, or what is it going to look like for me to, be the first one to speak versus waiting for someone to speak to me. And I kind of identify like you don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know yet I fully have been able to pinpoint like what can help people get past that uncertainty or that, I don't know, would you say fear?
Yeah, I would say fear, because I think uncertainty brings fear. Like, the not knowing is scary, because then we can't prepare, and our brain really loves preparing. As anyone with anxiety knows, like, your brain will prepare for every possible scenario.
All the alternative options, a whole blueprint.
It's a whole novel on like this one interaction and how it could possibly go, or like this one event. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the what ifs.
The what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do you see change happening for your clients? Or like, how would you conceptualize change happening for clients?
Yeah, I think honestly, when I was reflecting on change, I was like, I think there's 3 ways I see change.
Mm-hmm.
One is just like the supernatural hand of God kind of change.
Yeah.
Which honestly, personally, I felt happen in me when I was having panic attacks and didn't really like know what that was yet before I got into psychology. I remember like there was this one day we had like a guest speaker and it was like worship and I was at the altar and I was just like praying so hard to be healed of when I found out that there were panic attacks.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it like physically leave me, and that was just like the hand of God. You know, like that wasn't like therapeutic change. Like,
right.
And honestly,
it was a spiritual transformation.
It was spiritual, and I'll be honest, like there are times I still get panicky or like I feel anxiety rise, but like as a glory to God testimony, like I haven't had a full-on panic attack in like 7 years, I think.
I did not know that. I knew that you used to experience panic attacks, but I didn't know the time frame. Like how long.
A minute.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way of change, like the supernatural hand of God. And then the other 2 ways, my brain kind of categorized them in like qualitative, quantitative change.
The researcher in you?
Yeah, the nerd in me was like, this is qualitative and quantitative. Not in like exactly the research, but kind of. And what I mean is like, so especially in my clients, I see this like quantitative change in like, oh, I do this behavior less now. Or I have this thought more now, like a healthier thought. Or like I have this anxious thought less. Or like this emotional response is less intense. Like it's a little bit more categorical and it's a little bit more like CBT, I would say, like a little bit more behavior, a little bit more thought, like activity kind of change, which has an impact, but I think it has a very like specific impact. I don't know why I thought of like a tree. It's like a one branch, and yeah, that's good because that one branch has like little branches and leaves,
right?
But what about like
the rest of the tree?
The rest of the tree, and I think that's where I feel like the other type of change is like this qualitative change in therapy where people are like, I just feel generally better. Like I'm just a little bit more confident, or like I'm a little bit more like equipped. Like maybe like those quantitative changes haven't really happened, but like the foundational, so like the roots-ish, and I think that's a little bit more RCT for me, relational cultural therapy. I don't think I've said that like acronym. Yeah, and I think you need a little bit of both. I think we need to change both like a behavior, a thought pattern, but we also need to change our relationship with ourselves or with people around us. So like doing something different, but also being different. Yeah. And then I think that's why I'm integrative, because I think we need both. Like, can't just change the branches because the roots will still be there. Yeah. But if you just change the roots, you don't know how to get it to the branches.
Right. I love the part that you kind of conceptualize it as a tree, but the other part that stood out to me is like changing our relationship with ourselves. And I think one of the things that I've noticed like in your work is that you are very mindful of like, how do you feel within your body, your skin? How do you feel about yourself? What do you think about this? And I'm wondering for you, would you say, like with that example, does one come before the other?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I'm kind of thinking about it too.
I think in my work, since I've done CBT, like, I guess standalone CBT, and then I've done like an integrative, and then I've done way less CBT and like more processy work. Ideally, I would like, no, that's not true. I do both. In therapy, I do both.
It's
like
integrated.
It's so integrated because I'm even thinking of like how my therapy sessions go, and I start with the roots and I end with the branches. Like I start with like, where did that come from? Like, what voice is that? And like, how are you talking to yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And then I end with like, so what would that look like if we changed a thing?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we changed a thought, if we changed a behavior. So then I guess I'm answering my question. Roots.
The roots.
Roots.
Yeah. Especially like one of the questions, I think we've talked about this, is like, whose voice is that?
Yeah.
And like kind of explain that a bit more when we say like, whose voice is that? It's kind of like, that's the best way to explain it is, and correct me where like it may be different. For me, when I explain whose voice, or I ask a client whose voice is that, what I mean is this coming from you? Is this something that your parents used to say to you? Is this something that an ex used to say, or some figure in your life? Mm-hmm. For my clients who are more spiritually integrated with their approach to mental health, I'll ask them, like, is this the voice of the enemy? Do you feel like this is God's voice? Like, pinpoint whose voice that is, because to me, I think it's easier to address it if you know who you're speaking back to, and being able to say, oh, okay, no, this trauma speaking, or no, my mom used to say this all the time, and now I'm starting to say it to myself, and kind of like I don't know what the word is, like taking the place of that voice and kind of shaping it as, oh, it's just me. But when we step back and say, oh, where did that originally come from? So that tends to be how I kind of like think about it when I say like, whose voice is that?
Same. Yeah, that's exactly what I think. I think I would only just add like the societal pressures.
Ooh, yeah.
Because sometimes it's like the systematic. It's a yeah.
I feel like that's a heavy one too.
It is.
And it's so hard to detach from that, because the part of us has to be aware of that, and there can be pressure. I wonder if like part of what makes change difficult and implementing those steps that we want to see different in our life is because we're thinking about, how is society going to respond? How is my family going to respond? How is my spouse going to respond? Mm-hmm. We're thinking about all these voices and how they are going to feel, what they think of us making changes. I think something that comes to mind is like when boundaries. Yeah. When I'm like talking with clients about setting boundaries, and they have their plan. They say, this is my like way of like articulating my boundary, and this would be, for lack of a better term, like consequence if this boundary is crossed. But then they get back with their family, and it's like, or they get the pushback, and that can make it difficult to kind of stick with, this was the plan, this is what I want to do. And I recognize, like, depending on the family setting and environments and cultural variables, it can make it so much harder to do that.
Yeah, 100%. And as like a Hispanic woman, like those connections, like those family, friends, like it's so important, like to our wellness. And if any change will risk what you have, it becomes really risky to do it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And even think about societal consequences, like the judgments, and a lot of times peer pressure, I feel like, plays a role. Like, there's been many clients who I got to have one session with them, and one of the first things they tell me is, well, I haven't been doing therapy because this is what I thought of therapy. And my friends say, oh, are you crazy, or you must be going through this problem. Then they start feeling self-conscious, and then they like kind of pull away from therapy because they're worried about or thinking about, like, what are others going to think of me? What does me making a change for the betterment of myself is going to communicate to others, and how that's going to impact them?
Yeah. It is heavy. And I think another thing that gets in the way, and this is another like Dr. Ridley kind of word, is secondary gains. And so secondary gains are what we're getting out of staying complacent. And so, like, for example, like maybe we're in an unhealthy relationship, but the secondary gain, like what we're getting out of it, is like intimacy, or we're getting like validation, or we're getting emotional support at the cost of, there's a list, but that secondary gain can be more important, or can feel more important, or can feel so scary to let go of, that we will sacrifice that long list to keep that thing. And I think secondary gains get in the way a lot.
And I think I'm kind of thinking back to an episode that I did with Shatima. Shout out Shatima. And I remember one of the things I kind of like, and I've shared this with you, like a past relationship that I was in that was really just not great. And part of it was staying in it because I felt like, okay, at least I'm getting this out of the relationship, or maybe I need to kind of salvage it and like make it better. I kind of use the symbolism of like the rose-colored glasses that people tend to do when they're in an abusive relationship. They put on the rose-colored glasses and they see all the nice things, and the red flag of the relationship turns pink. Or maybe it's like an orange, and we're not seeing it for that list of things that are not serving us, those things that are harming us in the long run, whether emotionally, mentally, interpersonally, or even physically. And as well as, like, for me, it was spiritual. And so I definitely agree that's something that like keeps people in those cycles. I'm wondering for you, has there been a point in time, you mentioned kind of like the panic attacks. I'm wondering for you, at what point did you kind of, was it just like this moment of, I just want something different for myself, or like what triggered you to say like, I want to start praying about this, or I want to change this?
Yeah, it was, I can't remember exactly when this was. I think it was my first year of my master's program, because it started getting in the way. So like before, like in middle school, high school, like sure I'd have to like step aside from like an activity and like panic and then like get myself back together, but it wasn't getting in the way of anything. But my first, like, don't quote me, maybe my first year of my master's program, when I first started seeing clients, it was getting in the way of like having a session. Like like the panic was like so bad before that I was like, something has to change. Like I can't keep doing this. Like I can't see clients, can't panic before I see every single client. Like it was just draining. I wasn't doing good work. Like I couldn't learn. Like and at that point is when I was like, something has to change. So yeah, it was a lot of like reflection, exhaustion, desperation, and started praying about it. And then I started using all the CBT on myself.
I think I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, so I used all like, what are my cognitive distortions? Like, what is an alternative thought? Like, and I just, again, a lot of like prayer, a lot of like, and this is like, I'm a proponent of this, is like having like mottos or like something to repeat to yourself, like
affirmations.
Like affirmations. I love affirmations. I had like a whole little like like script before each session to like readjust and like teach myself like not to panic. And I think it was like accumulation of a lot of things like in my life. But yeah, it was just that I couldn't. Like I felt personally, like I remember there was this one day I walked into the office and like into the door of the counseling center and like panic. And at that moment, as I was walking in the hallway, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I literally can't. And that was the point where I was like, something's got to change. And that's where I started doing all the things.
And I see things kind of like visually as you're walking. I think I've said that to you before. And so I kind of see that moment happening for you. And I know for myself, like when I've like opened up about like the suicidality that I struggled with, it came to, if I think about it, it got to the point where I was like, I'm just tired of feeling like this, and like that exhaustion. I think it was also like some desperation. And I would say another thing that changed for me is hearing and seeing other people's hope. So I remember there's this one like turning point in my life where I was watching this. I've like been a Christian. I've been in relationship with God. I feel like since like elementary school, and it got deeper in middle school when my mental health stuff was coming up more. And as I like got older, I kind of was just like, it just happens. Like I just keep rolling with it and not really actually trying to change it. I was just like, this is a thing.
Yeah, that's how I felt in middle school too. Like, didn't have a word panic attack yet, but I was like, oh, this is just
a thing.
It's a thing. Gotta live with it.
Yeah. And I think for me, there was a sermon called Scandalous Grace. And I remember this moment. I was like sitting on, so like my bed is here and then the wall. For some reason, I was sitting on the floor between my bed and the wall, like in this corner, listening to the sermon. And I saw the hope that was shared, but also the validation of what I was feeling or what I was going through. And I felt so clearly God saying, like, kind of like, this is our crossroads. You're either going to continue this way, and my hand won't be with you.
Wow.
Or we can start making some changes, and I will be with you. It won't be easy, but I will be with you in it. And I think for me on the spiritual side, that was one of the things that was happening. And then also on just like a basic level of that exhaustion. And I think about it with my clients sometimes when I see that resistance, when I'm like, you can do more. I want more for you, but you have to want it.
Yeah.
And that's so hard when they don't want it.
It's so hard when they don't believe that they can change. Because I think there's like a part of them that wants to change, but there's a bigger part that doesn't believe
that it's possible.
And I think that's what's tough.
That is tough. Do you feel like clients need to get to a point of exhaustion and desperation for that to happen? Like, would you say that's like necessary, or?
I don't think it has to be. I think most people get there before they come to therapy.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to. Like I can see other parts of myself that I've tried to change, and I wasn't, but again, this was after that. So I guess I had the experience. And then I wasn't at like a desperate point. It was just like I got feedback and was like, oh, I don't know if I like that about myself. Let's try to pivot. So I don't think you have to. I think a lot of people will get there. Yeah.
How do you handle that when it comes up with clients? Like when you're at this point of tension, when they maybe are not quite yet ready to make changes, though they want it, and like navigating that point, like that crossroads.
Yeah, I think a couple things. So one, I tend to be very like motivating and uplifting, so that's like my first line of action. You're nodding like that tracks.
Yep, it tracks.
And so I'm like, okay, like what's worked in the past? When did you feel like you made a change? Like what went well? Like how can we bank on that? Like how can we copy paste? Kind of like bumping up, or like what isn't going well? Let's problem solve it. Like remember that time you did this? Like same thing. We're gonna do it again. Like so I start there. When that doesn't work, I shift to like how are we treating ourselves in this time? So I'm like, what are you telling yourself when you like don't do the thing? Because so what I noticed, and I'm kind of wanting to share like the metaphor of the two arrows.
Yes.
Okay.
I love it. No, I love it. I got way too excited.
No, you're good. So one of my mentors, Dr. Isaac, in like mindfulness, he taught me this metaphor. It's called the two arrow metaphor. And the idea is that life is an archer, and we are a deer, like in the forest. And life hits us with arrows. And when we get hit, like there's pain and there's a reaction and there's emotion. But what we do, instead of being like, I just got hit by an arrow and I am hurt and I need to like take care of the wound, I need to like take out the arrow, I need to like put a balm, like whatever we need, we instead judge ourselves for getting hit by the arrow. We're like, why was I by this creek? Why didn't I jump out of the way? Why am I so dumb? Like why? And we're like really harsh. And that is the same thing as getting a second arrow and putting it in ourselves. So now we're doubly suffering. So we double our suffering a lot of the time instead of treating that first arrow with like compassion, with kindness, with what we would someone else. Like if you saw your fellow deer get hit, you would run over there and be like, oh my gosh, what do you need? Like, how can I heal you? We wouldn't be like, well, I told you not to be standing by that tree. Like, why haven't you learned? Blaming, name calling, because we name call ourselves like we wouldn't name call anyone else. And that comes to mind because when we're trying to make change, it's like healing. Like, it's not linear, right? Like, we're not just going to continue getting better incrementally. And I think that's like a misconception that like the world has taught us. Like, if you're going to try something, you just get better. Like, you just...
like, right, like it's a linear thing. But there's challenges, and I always, what comes to mind is the image that is like success looks like, people think success looks like this, versus success can look like this, circles, squigglies. Like, it can look very convoluted.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I ask my clients, like, what are you telling yourself? And I really try to work with them, like, taking out that second arrow, because if we're trying to make change, and let's say we like falter or like revert to our old way of being, if we are kind to ourselves in that and we're motivating and we're caring, it's so much easier to be like, let me get back on track than every time we falter, which is a normal, completely expected part of the process. If we're then harsh on ourselves and we're critical, then we're just defeated. Self-deprecating. And then now we're like a little puddle on the floor, like so sad and like so defeated. Why would we try to get back on? And that like then reinforces this: if I try, I'm gonna fail, and when I fail, I'm gonna feel really, really bad. Instead of like, when I try and I fail, I'm gonna learn and I'm gonna be better the next time. But that's not how we treat ourselves, and I think that gets in the way so much of change.
I think sometimes we get in our own way. And I think like one of the things that I said in last week's episode is sometimes we see like failure or rejection as that is the end. Like, might as well like hang up the towel, and we never give ourselves another opportunity to try again. We kind of write ourselves off before, like almost as if we're trying to beat someone else to the punch. And I feel like sometimes I see that with my clients, that they give up before the perceived failure even happens. And I think sometimes that's like a protective mechanism of, if I don't try, then I won't feel the failure, and I won't feel bad about myself, or I won't feel this, I won't have to deal with the judgment. I can just like stop while I'm ahead, and then never try, like never start the business, never start the class, like never start therapy. And I don't know if there's like a way to help, like not like one size fits all, like way to help people get over that, like get over that hump. Because I think sometimes I see with clients, they get stuck right there, and they never, like, because of maybe like that fear of like, what would it look like if I actually tried, and what happens if I do not like succeed, or it doesn't go the way that I want it to, and helping them like kind of navigate that. I don't know if you have like a piece of advice that you would offer someone in that situation where they're kind of like already checking themselves out before they even try, or before they even take the steps.
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think one is like what you're talking about this like protection of ourselves from having to deal with failure. And the way my therapist told me she was like, you're rejecting yourself before you can face rejection from someone else. Whew. That was me too. I was like, oh, okay, all right. I'll just sit in that one for a second. And she was saying, like, because we've internalized that, like, we naturally our brain, like, naturally protects itself. And if others have been critical of us, then we become critical of ourselves, so that if it's coming from me and I reject myself and I am critical and I'm judgmental first and I fix it somehow, then that person can't be critical or judgmental of me. Or when they are, I'm like, oh, I already knew I was a failure, that's fine. Like, this isn't a revelation. But that doesn't work and doesn't help us, like, grow. It doesn't feel good. We're just, again, doubling our suffering. And so one thing would be, like, the acknowledgement of that, like, just realizing it. And I like the whose voice is that kind of thing. I also try to work with my clients in, like, values-based work sometimes, of, like, what value does this align with that can get us there? Because values, and again, I think I like values a little bit better than, like, specific goals sometimes, because they're more flexible and they can look like a lot of things. So, like, maybe our goal, I don't know, I can't think of an example.
Maybe your goal is, I want to be more confident.
Yeah, maybe our goal is, I want to be more confident, and then, like, the value would be, like, authenticity, or, like, genuine connection, or kindness, like, the value underneath it. Because then whatever that confidence looks like in the moment, if we could just be what's I'm looking for, like, be true to the value, it makes it a little bit easier. As well as, if we can come back to a value, it's more motivating than something that might be a little, like, superficial is too strong of a word, but, like, like, a little more, like, tangible. And that gives us flexibility on what it can look like, how it can be. So yeah, some of that awareness, some values-based work. I also usually suggest my clients trick their brain. Because the brain is a fun thing. And it has, like, just, like, neurocircuits and how it works that we can trick sometimes. Again, I don't know who I'm citing here, but on Instagram. There was a therapist, and she was talking about, like, one of the things that she does with her clients, and I tried it, and I was like, oh my god, it works. So our brain doesn't really know the difference when, like, we fake an emotion with our body and when we're actually feeling an emotion. So there's, like, some research, people put a pencil between their teeth, and the brain would light up in the areas of, like, happiness, because it simulates a smile.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so because the brain is, like, reciprocal, like, our body influences, like, the emotion influences our body, and vice versa. I think we forget a lot of times, like, your brain and your nervous system goes through your spinal cord and into your whole body. It's not just up here. And a lot of, like, our emotional centers and, like, our limbic system, that has, like, relay systems. Sorry, I'm going really neuroscience.
No, go.
Into like our pituitary and hypothalamus. And sorry, not your hypothalamus. Yeah, it is our hypothalamus. So it's not your okay. Sorry. Back. Our limbic system, pituitary, hypothalamus, into, like, our hormones, and it's a relay. So, like, as the body, so for example, like, as your breath becomes quicker, your brain then releases more cortisol, adrenaline, and vice versa. If your brain releases more cortisol and adrenaline, you will start breathing faster. It goes both ways. And so if we do things with our body, it tricks our brain into thinking, like, we're enjoying it or we're, like, excited. So I was trying to wake up without my alarm, or, like, without snoozing it. And so even when I like snoozed it like 3 times, I would get up and I'd be like, I love waking up early. And I would just say it. And I would do like my little victory pose, even though I didn't, right? And I'd smile. I'd be like, I love waking up early. And it's funny because like I was in like the dark of my room and like he's so not having it.
The
but
puppies running around and everything.
All the things. And I did that for a week. And then next week, I woke up without snoozing my alarm. And I was like, whoa, it worked.
That is so amazing.
It also works in if there's something like an anxiety-provoking or like an event you're dreading, if you pick like 2 or 3 things that you're looking forward to about that, it primes the brain to look for those things during the event.
I'm still in that one.
Yeah. The brain also doesn't really know the difference between imagination and real life because the same parts of the brain are activated. So if we imagine ourselves doing something well, or like, so like people who do like gymnastics, sports, like you visualize it first and then your body does it.
Right.
Because it lights up the same stuff.
Yeah.
So I usually suggest some brain tricks as well.
I love that, and it's kind of connecting. I'm not into the neuro stuff as much. I remember learning the brain. I remember dreading it.
Okay.
I feel like the one part that stuck with me, of course, is the hippocampus, because everyone remembers the hippo on campus. Yeah. I feel like that's the first
It's like the
thing
mitochondria of the cell.
I remember what they look like, because I'm a very visual person. So in order for something to stick with me, I have to see it. Like, I have to, like, actually see the images. So even when we talk about the nervous system, I'm seeing, like, the lighting up, like, images and stuff. But it also made me think about, I remember, kind of like one of my first experiences in a psych class, our professor just started laughing. And she just kept laughing and laughing and laughing. And before, like, it took a couple of seconds, everyone in the class are laughing. And she, like, processed it afterwards, and she said that laughter can be contagious, but also you can't help it when you're starting to kind of, like, she's kind of speaking about, like, mirroring, and we pick up on that. And she asked, so how is everyone's anxiety now? And we're like, oh, we didn't even realize the shift. Like, everyone started first class in this PsyD program, and we were all, like, bracing for, like, the worst, because we also, like, heard she was a tough teacher. And that was our first class, and we were all kind of, like, very much more relaxed afterwards. And I think that is, like, just so fascinating, like, how our mind and our bodies respond. Like, something that I tend to, like, do with my clients is progressive muscle relaxation.
That's a good one.
And I feel like I wish stuff like that was taught more. So, like, progressive muscle relaxation, this skill where you tense muscle groups one at a time, and then you release them. You hold them for a few seconds, release, move on to the next, like, muscle group. But I realized these are things that I could have used in middle school, high school, and we don't learn them unless you take a psych class, or unless you go to therapy, unless you're listening to a podcast. And there's this one, speaking of Instagram, because it made me think about this teacher. He's like a karate instructor, but he works only with, like, elementary school male kids. And he teaches them a lot of these skills that we're talking about. I'm like, I wish that was being taught more, so that, like, little Liabette and little Diamond didn't have to wait till they were in high school, or wait till they're in their master's program or in their doctorate program to start learning how to manage these things. And I don't know if there's necessarily, like, a way, like, how we go about, like, changing it earlier, because I feel like a lot of the things that clients come in with, it always stems back to childhood. It often, I'll say, stems back to childhood. And, like, how could we catch that faster or sooner? And I think I'm thinking about it in particular because I'm thinking of your mom and her being a teacher and her being in that environment. And I don't know. That's just, like, a thought that I don't even know where I was going with it. But it was just a thought that I had about, like, the generations coming up.
I've had the same thought when I worked with children, adolescents.
Yeah, you did work with kids.
Yeah, I was with kiddos for a while. And I had to say, I was like, and that's basically all I did.
Mm-hmm.
Just teaching him skills. Like, here's a skill, here's box breathing, here's muscle relaxation, here's positive affirmation, like, just skills.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because we need them. And my mom does positive affirmations with her students. She makes them do it, like, every day. I love that. I can imagine, like, my embarrassed high school self, though, being like, I am lovable. Like,
Right.
But it's so important, and it's so good, and we need it. And I think I have, like, a passion for neuroscience.
Mm-hmm.
And one, I'm just a nerd, but two, because I think it gives us compassion and grace for the change journey.
Yeah.
Because our brain, like, our neurons are wired in a certain way, and, like, anything that has been taught to us, if we do it over and over and over again, those neuronal pathways, like, those the way it's, like, shaped in our mind and body, become, like, thicker and, like, more easily accessible. So as we're trying to change, and what's awesome is your brain has neuroplasticity, like, it changes, but it takes time and it takes repetition. And people are like, why did I do that? Like, why did I go back to my old way? I'm like, because that neuronal pathway has been in existence for, like, the past 18 years, like 25 years.
It's not going to go away in a day.
No. And so, like, it gives you, for me, it gave me a lot of, like, grace and, like, compassion. And I'm like, oh, my brain is just, it's changing. It's just taking a little time. Like, it's okay. Like any other kind of, like, healing process. Like, we don't get mad at well, maybe you get mad at yourself. But, like, if you have, like, a cold or, like, the flu, and, like, your cough lingers, and, like, maybe one day you feel like, oh, I haven't coughed all day, and then the next day you cough a few more times, you're not, like, berating yourself.
Shame on me for coughing.
Right? And it's like, you're just healing. Like, you're just healing.
Yeah.
And so I think the same for, like, therapy and, like, our brain body.
Yeah. I think grace is such an important piece when it comes to change, because we tend to be our worst critics.
Yeah.
And we tend to be really good at beating ourselves up. And I think something for me that I had to learn to start doing for myself, and it reflected once I kind of tapped into, like, the inner child work. I was able to kind of help clients with that. And I don't think many people kind of have that moment of, let me stop treating myself and beating myself up and my emotions up and treating my behaviors as, oh, I'm an adult, I shouldn't, or I should. And I, like, don't should yourself. I had right. And instead thinking about, okay, let me think back to when 18-year-old so-and-so, I'll use myself as an example, when 18-year-old Diamond felt this way, when 15-year-old Diamond felt this way, and let me treat myself like that. Would I speak to a 15-year-old with this harsh, berating voice, or would I be compassionate? Would I encourage them and motivate them? Would I show them grace? And we don't do that with ourselves enough. I know for me, it was more, I learned more about grace from a spiritual perspective. Same. That's why I was wondering if, like, what helped you kind of be willing to accept grace. Because I think some people struggle with accepting grace for themselves, and they're like, I don't deserve grace. Have you seen that with, like, clients?
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about it as you were talking. I was thinking, a lot of my clients, when I get the resistance, and I'm like, give yourself grace. I, like, say that so much. The resistance I get is sometimes like, but if I am not this harsh, I won't change, or, like, I will be bad, or, like, I will be worse. Like, if I don't think of the worst thing, like, how will I be prepared, or, like, it's like almost like a safety net. And for me, I'm like, if we choose to continue to, like, be attached to that and, like, give that energy and power, like, it's not helpful. Your brain will do it by itself. Your brain is already giving you worst case scenarios. Like, it's already doing these things because it's trying to protect you in its funky way. So I'm like, and in therapy, I'm not trying to, like, strip you of protective, like, instincts. We're just not, like, leaning on them or, like, attaching ourselves to them. Because I think they're afraid sometimes that if we do give ourselves grace and we give ourselves kindness and empathy, we'll just completely like lose motivation or like completely not achieve what we're wanting to achieve. But it's actually the opposite. And I share this also, like in our research in like behaviorism, you can't punish a behavior into extinction. Like
you can't.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And when I share that, they're like, "What? Like, why do we get punished our whole life?" I'm like, I don't know. But you can't punish a behavior into extinction. Like, it doesn't. That's not how the brain. That's not how humans. Like, that's not how we work. Yeah. But you can reward the opposite behavior so much that the original behavior becomes extinct.
Yeah.
So same thing with how we talk to ourselves. Like, you can't shame yourself into success. You would have to uplift yourself into success. And I will say that the messages we receive our whole life go against that.
Oh, does it?
So we can have grace for how difficult it is to have grace for ourselves.
Right.
That feels like a Kevinism.
I was going to say, this reminds me of Kevin. Because it sounds like something that he would say. And also, as you were like speaking about that, it made me think about, and this is veering kind of like all different.
I love it. This has been a fun path.
But I remember at one point I was slightly interested in working in prisons, and so I like was doing this whole like deep dive into like working in prisons, juvenile centers, and I was researching and comparing the data on U.S. Prisons and juvenile systems versus other countries. And I remember I always get mixed up. I can't remember if it's Iceland or Ireland.
One of them.
I'm geographically challenged, but it starts with an I. And the way they did their prison system was that it was more so like that motivation and rewarding the good behaviors, and it wasn't as punitive as the U.S. system is. And they treated, they didn't even call them inmates, they called them residents. They treated the residents as like family. So there weren't bars on their rooms. They had like actual rooms. They kind of, having worked in a hospital setting like Shepherd Pratt, it resembled more of that than a prison, and they weren't forced to wear certain uniforms, and they got to integrate and interact with staff more casually, and their rates of like return or repeat offenders was so much lower than the U.S. And I'm like, why? We see this. This is a known thing. The research is there. Why haven't we made these changes? Like, not just like within people in our day-to-day lives and like our individual lives, but even in the systemic like worlds, when it comes to like these larger systems like prison systems and school systems. Like, why? It frustrates me.
Oh yeah.
It just frustrates me to see like when we have the answer and we're still failing the test. And we choose not to do anything different. I know, just being honest about the U.S. prison system, there's a lot of, I'll get flagged for this. I'm choosing my words wisely. There are a lot of reasons prisons continue to function in the U.S. the way they do.
Yes, there are.
And you can draw your own conclusions. And there's a lot of systemic benefits to it, but it's not benefits for humanity. And at the end of the day, whether you're a spiritual person or not, you have to care about humanity because you're stuck here. You're going to interact and engage with other people. Even if you live in your house your whole life, at some point you're going to have an interaction with somebody, whether it's the Amazon driver or the Pizza Hut delivery person. I think that's what worries me the most about humanity. It's like, even when we do see like these opportunities and these kind of like these answers to change, we don't choose them, and that's sad.
It is.
I think that was just my thought. It's sad.
It is.
Yeah. And I think it also ties in with kind of confronting, like when we see these like challenges or these behavioral patterns, the evidence of things that we don't like, and we don't actually implement some type of change, or whether it is steps, or whether it is reaching out for help, whatever it is that would allow us to change what we're seeing. Because I think sometimes there's comfort in, like, this looks familiar, even though it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you have something that you would offer, or like words of wisdom that you would give to someone who's in this place where they see this image, they see this view of something that they don't like, and they haven't yet gotten to themselves to that point of, like, let me make the first step of scheduling the therapy appointment, or showing myself more grace, or changing how I talk to myself, or whatever it is that they need to do to kind of, like, even if it's a tippy toe.
Yeah. I think I had different, like, responses to each of those, like, examples.
I stacked.
So I was like, wait. Yeah. I will also clarify, or I guess I'm just feeling the need to be like, I also struggle with change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's an ongoing thing. And there are things that are easier for me to change, things that are harder for me to change. I think when it comes to self-talk, I do, so, again, CBT, handouts, write it down, but I also, something that feels a little bit, I'm also, like, a big proponent of, like, integrate it into things that you're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, make it a seamless, like, integration into your life as much as possible. So, like, for self-talk, I recommend my clients, I'm like, say it out loud. Like, talk to yourself out loud, because our mind is a very, very spirally place. Like, you are on a train and it goes, and you're believing it. Like, the whole time you're like, this is a valid concern. Mm-hmm. I could, like, say this horrible thing to the cash register, and everyone in the HEB, oh, there's not an HEB here. If you're from Texas, you know where HEB is. The grocery store. And it feels so real in your head. I talk to myself out loud all the time. And it's so funny because I'll say something hurtful to myself out loud and immediately be like, oh. And then I'm like, no. And then I fix it. Mm-hmm. Same thing, like, if you were writing it down in the CBT handout, like, harmful thought, alternative thought. Mm-hmm. So one, like, practicing that self-talk, I think out loud is helpful because you can hear it and then you're like, whoa, that was harsh. Or what? That doesn't make sense. Yeah. Maybe not, like, in public, but
at the checkout line.
I know. And then you said other examples, and I had, like, other things.
Yeah, I realized that I stacked. I just was like,
It was good. It was good. And my brain gave me different answers, but I can't retrieve them now.
And I think it's also reflective of just, like, the comfort that we have with each other, and, like, just the flow of conversation. But I think what I was really trying to kind of, like, pull in together into one, like, seamless question was advice to help people make that first step towards change.
Gotcha.
Whatever that change may look like for them.
Yeah. I think I have, like, a tiered response.
Let's go for it. Like, this can be like a free crash course therapy session with you.
There we go. This is what I would tell you if you were in a therapy room with me. It would feel different, but this is basically what these are the points I'm hitting. One, if whatever you lack, pray for it. Mm-hmm. So I believe, like, the Lord will provide what you lack. Like, mm-hmm. What is that scripture? And it's like, my strength is seen in your weakness. Mm-hmm. Something.
My strength is made perfect in your
weakness. Made perfect. Mm-hmm. Yes. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. So I believe fully that, like, if we pray, like, for the Lord, whatever we need, if it's like, if it's motivation, if it's, like, compassion, if it's like, strength, if it's courage, like, everything. And and you can find scriptures on all of these things, which is another part of my advice, is like find a motto, like a thing to repeat to yourself about this change happening that will comfort, that will motivate, that will get you going. So if it's like I remember during my like panic attack kind of healing process, like I was quoting so many of like the anxiety scriptures of like the Lord is like my peace, and like he is like my shelter, and like all of the like Jesus' names and like what they mean over my life.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, because there's power.
Yeah.
And so pray for what you lack. Find a scripture or a motto or something that you can easily revert to. And this is also kind of like a neuroscience-y thing. Like we can light up that pathway. We can light up like what we want to step into. Yeah. I would pair it with something. So, for example, I like don't like doing chores around the house. So I would pair it with like an audiobook that I really wanted to keep listening to. And so I'd be like, I gotta listen to an hour of my audiobook as I'm doing this chore. So I'm like pairing it with
like
something.
making it positive or giving it a positive association.
Yeah. And then the self-talk is so important, like being kind to ourselves, being gracious with ourselves, and not rejecting ourselves before rejection has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like pick your tough.
Pick your tough.
Pick your hard. I don't know what that Instagram post was exactly, but pick your hard, pick your tough, something like that. And then another like kind of big thing that I teach my clients a lot with the like I'm on the precipice of doing the thing, but I can't get myself to do the thing. Is like a self-care sandwich. So you do like a short like self-care task of like I get all of my things are books. I'm like I get to read my book for 15 minutes, or like I get to I don't know, take a bubble bath for like 30 minutes, or I get to XYZ, like watch one episode of the show, and then I do the thing, and then I reward myself with like a self-care thing after. So it's like a little sandwich.
I like that.
And depending on what kind of change we're making, if you need breaks in between, use like little self-cares.
Oh, I like that. It's kind of like, I think I've only ever done that in the framework of like breaks when I'm like studying.
Yeah.
So, like 5 minutes of playing the game, 10 minutes of study, those sorts of things, and then 5 minutes of game or whatever.
Yeah, like a Pomodoro timer.
Yeah.
That work.
I love the self-care sandwich.
Yeah, self-care sandwich. Visualization, highly recommend. Imagine yourself doing it.
Yeah.
In all the detail, in all the excitement.
See yourself succeeding as opposed to seeing yourself failing.
Yep. See yourself succeeding.
My neurons are firing, and it made me think of Habakkuk 2:2. I think it's 2:2 of like write the vision and make it plain.
Ooh.
And I typically talk like I think it goes into more detail of like write the vision in big block letters so that you can see it. So you can see it while you're on the run or something like that. I'm mixing NIV with KJV. But what it basically talks about is like whatever you're pursuing or wanting to see different, or what you're wanting to see yourself like accomplishing, kind of like the miracle question, like what would be like that success, what would it look like, is writing it down. And I feel like that's an important thing. And for me, when you said like vision, I thought about my collage book, because a lot of the things that I want for myself or want to see like change or goals that I have, I make them images. So like I have this collage book, and one is like the financial changes I want to see and what that would look like, and kind of even inserting myself in some of those pictures, what I want marriage to look like one day into my life. But the person I want to show up as when that happens. And I think it is important for us to kind of change like the movie that we're playing in our head. So I love the visual piece too.
Thanks, yeah. And then as you were talking, I was thinking we celebrate all of like the little victories. And I'm very and it's probably like the CBT version of me. Like I'm very like I say it in either out loud or in my head of like I did a great job of doing this, and even if it's tiny and it feels not as significant as you want it to, like those are like the little building blocks.
Yeah.
And our brain works with rewards. So, because I think this is another thing that I see in my clients a lot. Like they take one step, but they wanted to take 4. So then they like get mad at themselves. But getting mad at yourself for taking that one step is not going to make you want to take another step.
Right.
But if you took one step and you were like celebrated it.
Yeah.
I think this is like was also part of like just my mom instilling confidence in me a lot. I like compliment myself when I do something.
Right.
Like I don't know what I did at work yesterday, and I told myself I was like, I am an asset to this team.
and are.
Thank you. But I was working on stepping into like my professional self and like being able to like take that space.
Take on that role.
But same thing in other changes. Like if I do a chore, I'm like, I am an excellent housekeeper. Like I did a great job at cleaning this kitchen. Like even if it's not complete, like even if the task isn't perfect and like what I wanted it to be, because that reward, even like in myself, makes me want to do it again.
Yeah.
Because then next time I'm like, I want to be a fantastic like XYZ.
Yes.
And so celebrate.
I love that. It reminds me of I think it's Pastor Furtick, that Pastor Stephen Furtick, I think is his name. And I remember there was one like interview I was watching with him, and he was talking about speak to the it was about like marriage counseling, and I know you also do couples counseling, like one of the many roles that you play in the world. But he's talking about like marriage counseling. He's talking about the idea of speak to the version of your husband or wife that you want to see come into life.
Wow.
So instead of like, you don't do this, and I don't like that you do this, speak to, I love that you took out the trash today. I love that you pay so much attention to what I need, and you like do this or acts of service and stuff, like speaking to those things that you appreciate versus just focusing on all the negatives.
Yeah.
And I feel like that kind of like ties in a lot to what you're saying.
Yeah, it does. And we're speaking to that part of ourselves.
Yeah. That is so beautiful.
Thank you.
This has been such a good talk.
It was really fun.
I'm so glad we got to do this, and I'm so grateful to not just have you on the podcast, but also to get to know you. Like they get you today. I get you every day. Well, except Saturdays, Sundays, but Monday to Friday. There works. And I've just appreciated our like friendship that we were able to grow throughout this internship. So
thank you.
Thank you so
much. I also love and appreciate our friendship. Yes. And I felt honored to be on this podcast. I felt so profesh. You want me to be on a podcast? Like it feels cool.
You're amazing. You really are. Yeah.
You're amazing. You have a podcast.
I'm doing something. I was about to like.
I was gonna catch you.
No.
What's an alternative thought? How can we celebrate?
I saw it getting ready to happen, so I was like, nope, we won't do that. So, with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed Dr. Liabette, seemed to be being here and joining us for this conversation. I hope that was helpful to you. And if nothing else, first off, I want you to continue to love yourself, continue to speak life over yourself, and speak life into the things that you're trying to accomplish. And do not give up. Don't give up. Like, subscribe, comment, share your thoughts. I love the feedback that you guys give. It's helpful for me to know what helps you guys and what is beneficial or just interesting for you guys, and I will integrate that more into episodes. And if nothing else, remember, a little faith helps. Bye.